Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Reload. Welcome, one and all, as we do each week here on Prediction, the esports video talk show network. You can find The Reload live on twitch.tv/Prediction Esports, or you can find us on YouTube for all our shows on demand. Predictions offers the chance to learn and converse on more in-depth subjects, but all of the latest and greatest esports, from NBA 2K to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, to also, right, Call of Duty. Now, I'll be honest with you. I was sitting kind of thinking about reflecting on the year that Call of Duty has kind of had up to this point. I was even watching the Fortnite World Cup and kind of thinking about a number of different things in terms of the way that esports has kind of progressed over the year. And like I said, I was kind of in the midst of reflecting a little bit, in the midst of trying to think about, you know, the way that the year has kind of progressed up to this point and just trying to get myself under things, if you will. And I was watching the World Cup. I was watching the Fortnite World Cup, and I know this is obviously a Call of Duty show, but I was thinking about it. I was kind of going over a few different scenarios in my head, and I was watching, you know, the young player, the 16-year-old Booga, dominate. 16 years old, wins $3 million just by a few games of Fortnite, right? On LAN, obviously qualifications come through, but it started to get me thinking on the topic of events. And you think about all the crazy moments and the highlights that kind of happen throughout the year when it comes to other esports, Call of Duty as well. But there is something that a lot of people have started to forget about, at least when it comes into Call of Duty. And the players, for me, are what bring those highlight moments. Those are the people that kind of change things up. And I feel like a lot of people aren't always kind of thinking with that in mind. They're not always super aware of the highlights, but they're not aware of the players. And the reason why I'm bringing up this subject is because of the players, the age of the players, who are really playing in these tournaments. And I got to say, right, who exactly are these players who are making the highlights? I'm going to point out a few things, a few stats coming into the CWL Pro League this year. We had 27 players that were in the playoffs this season that weren't in Season 2 playoffs from last year. 14 of those 27 are rookies in the CWL, meaning that they have never played in the CWL Pro League previously. 5 of those 27 come from a roster that wasn't even in the CWL last year, meaning that they never really were in the Pro League when it came down to last year, weren't in playoffs, whatever it may be, and they're a team that currently sits as one of the best in the world in Genji. At the start of the year, 30% of the entire Pro League was filled with players that have never played in the CWL before. So all these numbers, right? The discussions, the talk upon, oh, well, you know, this is great, you know, in terms of, oh, this is pretty interesting. You know, the numbers are, you know, what do the numbers mean, Mason? Like, we kind of get those Call of Duty subjects and whatnot. But for me, this goes to show that Call of Duty is evolving, and the entirety of esports is beginning to evolve as well. And what we learned from the Fortnite World Cup was the younger fan base. The younger generation is starting to make their come up, and the same thing is affecting, like I said, every other esport that currently exists out there. It means that the CWL is evolving. It means that every other esport that exists out there today is evolving. And that much difference from the numbers that I just listed, that much difference, that much change means that there must be a system in place to allow and to continue to funnel in young talent, amateurs, whatever it may be, semi-pro players. That means that there needs to be a system in play to get them their shot, to get them their opportunity, if you will. There needs to be a funneling system, a contender, or better yet, an academy system in play for the mass amount of talent that exists when it comes to Call of Duty next year for franchising. That's the main subject that I'm currently discussing at this moment, and obviously a lot of people kind of have their eyes on franchising for next year, but not a whole lot of people are thinking about the future. There's not a whole lot of people thinking about what franchising really means for not just the pros, but what were the pros before they became the main guys, the guys who are making the highlights. So I was kind of reflecting, watching the Fortnite World Cup this past weekend, obviously having a fantastic time doing so. It was a very well done event, but at the same time it started to make me realize, look at all the young talent that exists. Like, how crazy is it that we are in the early stages of esports, but who is going to be taking over for us? Like, I obviously come from more of an NBA background. I've watched the NBA for a ton. I played basketball all my life, and I used to think about the players who played, in the early stages, right? The kind of the guys who were there from the beginning, and everyone always talks about how bad they were in comparison to today's athletes. How are we going to do that when it comes to esports? And what are these systems in play to allow for that to continue to be a thing, right? And I know a lot of people talk about, oh my gosh, the NCAA or collegiate, whatever it really may be. And I know there's obviously a lot of pre-existing issues with those. But if you really think about it, where is that for COD? Where is that for other esports? And like I said, they are starting to implement academies, contenders for Overwatch, what it may be. But if we, that's going to throw out the high, I guess the ideal situation that a lot of people are thinking for next season. Open events, are they going to exist? How is the Pro League going to function? If we do not, for Call of Duty, have a system in play next year for the younger talent, for the amateurs, if you will, if there is no system in play, considering there is no real amateur division right now, will there be next year? Would we have seen a Beezy? Would we have seen Simp, Major Maniac, Envoy, Celium, Asim, Dylan, Brack, Skies, all of those names, would we have seen them? Would we have seen what their capability is without open events? Probably not. Most likely, we would have never seen most of them come about. All of their talent would have been wasted away, not doing anything, trying to play in events, or really just trying to make anything of their names, maybe playing in locals, whatever it may be. But I gotta say, I'm nervous for next season because I've heard little to nothing about the amateur scene. And we'll obviously talk more about franchising throughout the show today, but it got me thinking. It really did. It got me thinking, watching the young talent that exists in Fortnite. The average age of a player who was competing was 16 years old. 16 years old to play for what is the biggest esports tournament based off of prize money in history. A lot of people are saying, oh, you can't really call it esports. Competitive gaming. We call it esports. I understand to a point, but at the same time, it is the largest competitive gaming prize pool in history, and solely to one single player, which is unreal to think about. A 16-year-old just walked away with $3 million, and there are still esports, maybe ourselves included with Call of Duty, who are not waiting or preparing for the future. And as I mentioned, right, I'll go through the names again, just for those who aren't aware. Abizi, Simp, Major Maniac, Envoy, Celium, Asim, Dylan, Brack, Skies. Those are rookies. A lot of those names are put in the top 5 list, put in the top 3 list for players in the world right now. How have we heard nothing about the amateur scene up to this point? And I'll say this. It's worrying me because I've tried to put my questions out there, and I obviously know a few people who are in the scene and kind of behind the scenes, if you will. I've laid out a few questions. Silence. Absolutely nothing. I've heard little to nothing about the amateur scene, and I'm not sure if they're prepared for next season. And so my big worry is, and I obviously have a huge fascination with the amateur scene. I always have. I'm a huge fan of college sports. I'm trying to get involved with collegiate esports more. But as a person who has commentated over the amateur scene for the longest amount of time, someone who is continually commentating over the amateur scene right now, I can tell you that when we were watching players like Brack and Parzelli and Envoy, even some other guys as well, Phantoms was a major one, Brack, like I mentioned, those guys were facing off in a lot of, major OLT tournaments. They weren't always winning them. It wasn't as if, there was one team who was way and leagues and bounds above everybody else. It wasn't like that. It absolutely is not that way. I can tell you right now. It was not like that whatsoever. There were teams who were competing against them consistently. So the way that I look at this is that we need to have a system in play. Every esport shouldn't be learning from Fortnite in terms of the way that they handle competitive, because I've been very critique heavy on Fortnite since, trust me, the day that it came out, the way that they've kind of handled esports for me has not been my favorite. But the way that we can learn from them is based off of the average player base, the young talent that's existing. And if you can do it on a keyboard, you can do it on a controller in terms of the way that those things start to translate. And a lot of guys, which is honestly, it kind of hurts me to say this, a lot of guys we're talking about in interviews who are 15, 16, 17 years old, what have they been talking about? What scene do you come from? Oh, I come from Call of Duty. Oh, I translated from Call of Duty. I made the transfer over from COD to a controller on Fortnite, and then I realized I need to switch it over to PC. We never really saw the change up in terms of it working the opposite way. There aren't any players who are coming from Fortnite to COD. There's a lot of players who are coming from COD to Fortnite. Even major streamers, right? A lot of people have started to kind of drift away, if you will. And I understand the 18, player limit. We can obviously talk about that another time, but there are so much talent that exists there, and it's not being tapped into correctly. I don't think the way that it's being handled right now is the greatest, and I don't think that moving into next year it's going to be a primary concern. I think with all the things that are being jumbled up right now in terms of how organizations are going to be paying for all these things, the way they're going to be handling what seems to be homestand events, which we'll actually be getting into here in just a second, and then also the prize pool, trying to establish from the ground level a new esports organization, wanting to hire staff, and it's like, oh yeah, the amateurs or the young players, we need to have scouts for sure. That's going to be crucial, but that's not the main topic. That's not the first thing, maybe even the 10th thing on the list. And while a lot of franchises right now are trying to juggle all of these things, the amateur scene isn't something that they're concerned with right now. That's by no means their main concern, their main topic for discussion. It is other things. And that for me is worrisome, because how are you building how are you building the scene? How are you building what is going to be your future of this thing whenever 30% of the league this year was filled with CWL rookies? Last year, Kenny, somewhat of a CWL rookie. I mean, he is a CWL rookie. He's not overall, but hasn't played in the longest of times. A young guy comes out, wins MVP. This year, and also the best player, rookie of the year, whatever you want to label it as. Pharaoh as well, great, very, very solid contender. Probably should have won rookie of the year based off the fact that he is an actual rookie, but you kind of get my point. Even this year, every single person who's in that conversation, a lot of people would say, oh, I think Dylan's up there. Oh, I think Brack's up there. Oh, I got to have, Simp up there. I got to have Envoy. All of those guys are rookies, man. All of them. Every single one of them. They're all rookies. In terms of, if we're going to call Kenny the rookie of the year from last year, you got to call the same thing here for Envoy. It's crazy to me. It's literally crazy to me how much talent that exists, how young the generation is that we have coming up and are still consistently playing, yet there is no focus. 30%. 30% of them. It's crazy. It's crazy for me to think about. But I know we've been talking about juggling. We've been talking about a number of different things in relation to the CDL, and I would love to hear your guys' thoughts as well. You guys can feel free to get involved in the chat, and if you haven't done so already, you obviously need to make sure if you haven't, to follow us here on Twitch to stay up to date on all the number of different discussions that we've got going on. The latest discussions around the CWL, Super Smash Bros, and NBA 2K League, a lot more on the way. I was actually having a chat with a few people here at Prediction, and we were already talking about a number of different games that we're going to be jumping into, and I won't give any spoilers for those, but just make sure to stay tuned for that. Make sure to follow us on Twitter as well. You guys can follow those, or kind of click on those links throughout the panels that we have below on the Twitch stream, but a lot of awesome stuff coming up. But in terms of the CDL for next season, I know I've been talking about, the juggling. There's a lot of things to kind of be thinking about right now. And for me, the CDL is clearly building up more every day, right? We know that. We've been following the announcements. We've been seeing all of the articles. We've been seeing all of the major discussions that people have been making up and obviously posting about. There's been more information that's been learned, and like I said, it's turned into a multitude of different articles. And I want to talk about one specific report coming from sportsbusinessdaily.com, along with others, but I'll be referencing theirs more specifically. And the article title, which came out a few days ago, was Call of Duty to have city-based events model in 2020. Okay, all right. Well, to a casual fan, maybe someone who doesn't follow previous esports, you're thinking, all right, well, okay, that sounds kind of cool to me. But at the same time, how is it going to work? Is it going to work like professional sports? And from what we've seen in the OWL, which is a very clear indicator and oftentimes a fantastic example of what the Activision Blizzard company wants the CDL to be like, we've seen the OWL start to experiment, if you will, with these. We've seen the OWL already adopt this with the Dallas Fuel. They wanted to already have, and they have actually had the homestand events. I know they're already talking about next year. They want all of their games, or at least most of them, to be homestand events. They previously have played all their games at the LA Arena, and it's been fantastic. But their goal is to have every franchise have, much like we do in every other professional sport, you have a stadium, right? Every single professional sport has a stadium. They do that. They work on other esports, etc. And Call of Duty is already thinking about having this. So you can obviously hear a little bit of my concerns at this moment. A few of my issues when it comes down to this is Call of Duty getting in over their head? Is the CDL starting to get a little bit over their head? Because, like I said, we're trying to be very similar to the OWL, which is fine. I get that, right? You're following after, the older brother at this moment. But I don't know if franchises are prepared for the amount of stress that is going to come with all of these things. And it's getting a little bit worrisome because I don't know if we're getting I don't know if we're getting a little bit too farther progressed than we should be, or if we're right in that sweet spot. Because my big thing as of this moment is we are trying to do a lot right now. Like the Call of Duty scene, the CDL, we're trying to do a lot right now because we're already throwing in a number of different tasks, right? We're throwing in a number of different things in terms of, we need to make sure we have the prize. We need to kind of build up a number of different things and infrastructure. We need to make sure we have the rosters paid out. We need to make sure we have a good team. All of those things will also end the topic of being worried about the most basic stuff. Viewership is in question. Is this another weight? Yes, it's absolutely a weight. So let's go over a few things if this were to come about. And I obviously don't know all the logistics. I'm not getting into the specifics of, we got to rent a space, we got to build a location, we need to, do all this stuff. But from a general point of view, we must have a location for these games. Okay, cool. All right, got it. If I'm gonna be a CDL organization, okay, we must have a location for these games. Got it. So that means you're gonna need a location. First off, you're gonna need commentators, you're going to need production, you're going to need an arena, you're going to need staff, you kind of get my point. You're going to need to do a lot of things on top of what we already have going on. And like I said, we've already seen the OWL adopt this. The Dallas Fuel, they've already wanted to do homestand events. It's kind of been their thing, but it took the OWL 2 years to get there. It's taken practice. It's taken time. It's taken experience. It's taken a number of different little things in order to make sure that this is even a actual possibility. And so, like I said, we're seeing the OWL adopt it, but it took them time. It took at least 2 years to get to this point, and it took some research in order to make this happen as well. And I know this article doesn't go the most in depth, but it sounds as if, based off the wording, and like I said, it's not 100%, based off the wording, it sounds as if all of these want to be one-off in terms of each team must have a dedicated space of which these matches are played in. And I don't know 100%. We don't know 100% if it's going to be confirmed, if that is the case. But we talk about the number of different things that are involved in the CDL right now. The price, people are talking about, oh my gosh, the price to get in is too high. Viewership is in question. Is Call of Duty getting in over their head? And I'll be honest, I think so. I think it's a little early. I'll be honest, my question is, how much is really being put into this? And I know that's a very broad question to ask, but how much weight, like what really is the severeness of franchising this year for everybody involved, right? In Activision Blizzard's case, there is a lot to look over in terms of this situation. There's a lot of pieces that need to be in play. Are they willing to tone the game to this? Are they willing to tone the game to the situation that we have in hand? Or is Infinity Ward prepared for the situation that they have in hand, right? They're the first title that probably was caught off guard to do all of these things, to be the main title of choice for what is a massive step for competitive next year. I'm sure they probably didn't come into this title expecting, oh yeah, we need to make a competitive game. They're thinking we're going to go off the regular model. So whenever we're looking at this and we're kind of going over these subjects, we're learning more and more things over the year in terms of the CDL, what to expect. Already going with the homestand idea, I think for me is worrisome because, like I said, we're looking at a lot of different factors. We're even worried about the most basic things, at least in my opinion, which is viewership. Even viewership, but that is a thing that is in question right now. Can Call of Duty even handle the weight of the way that the next title is going to hold? And I don't know, right? So, like, Call of Duty is kind of on a stable pace. It's kind of stably going down tier by tier by tier. And so I'm not sure if it's going to be able to hold that weight. Now, I'm actually going to take a few looks at the chat here for a moment. And I see J Prof in the chat said, I think the one advantage that the CDL has in comparison to the OWL is that the CDL can look at the strengths and weaknesses of the OWL and their homestands and learn from it. Before the OWL, Overwatch really didn't have much in terms of big lands. Con has been having major lands for years, and with all those years of knowledge, plus looking at the OWL mistakes, I think the CDL is in a good spot. Now, I agree with that, J Prof. I absolutely do. And I think you bring up a fantastic point, and one of the positives, I know I've been kind of focusing on the negatives in this situation. My worry with that, though, is that it's not about the CDL learning from those things. It's also about the organizations who are involved learning from those things. How many OWL organizations have done a homestand event? A few? Maybe one? I honestly don't even know the answer to that question, but it's not all of them. So my big thing is, in the midst of translating over Are the organizations going to be prepared? Because it's not the CDL handling every single org and saying, okay, this is what you need to do. These are the steps in play. This is how we're going to do this. Here's your staff. Here's this. I mean, surely there's going to be multiple games on a day-to-day basis. Or if not, there's going to be at least one game every day. You're not going to expect all the casters to be locating from all those spots. You're not going to expect all the same staff to be locating from each individual position. They have to be, going every single day. And that's the worrisome part for me. So I totally get what you're trying to bring up, J-Prof, and I think that you did a fantastic job at explaining it. My worry isn't necessarily just from the CDL's point of view. It's from the organizations that are involved with the CDL, because those are the teams, that's the infrastructure that needs to be there, and I'm worried that it's not going to be. I'm worried that it's not in the right stage to do so, and the organizations have a lot on their plate. I think that's fair, right? The organizations have a lot to do right now in terms of what kind of other expectations, because they're trying to pay out the prize pool. They're trying to be aware of rosters for next year. And there's a lot of organizations that don't have an esports infrastructure right now, or if they do, they have no history, they have no prior ties to Call of Duty. A lot of them have nothing. They have nothing as of this moment. I know I've been told that 3 of them right now have pretty much just paid, and that's it. Like there have been nothing that's really done in the moving forward steps. And so, not just from the franchise's point of view, in terms of the organizations, but from the fans' point of view, my worry from this all is, are we getting a little bit over our heads here, right? Are we trying to accomplish too much in a short period of time? Because I think even if you just give a year at what is previously the OWL location, right? The headquarters, if you will, the LA stage. What if you just throw it over there for a year? Like, just give it a year, right? Learn from the mistakes, because, granted, we've had a few homestand events. We've had a few. Especially, I know everyone's kind of main focus is the Dallas Fuel. We watched that event. I know there were a few issues, so you learn from those things. But you don't learn everything from one event. As a commentator who has worked a few events, I didn't learn everything after one event. I learned it over time, and if anything, I learned more as I went on the little details. And those are the things that are really going to make this succeed a lot. Like I said, I'll be honest, it's a little bit early, in my opinion. I'm a little bit worried in terms of how much weight is being thrown into it, and is there a massive swing behind Activision in all of their franchises, or is this just being more of a load put on? Is this, to kind of give examples, is this the boss pretty much throwing things onto the workers and hoping that they just accomplish it, or is it a matter of everyone working in tandem together? Because that is my big question right now: is how much seriousness is being taken from this, and how much kind of latency is going to be put on this as well. Because if you start to slow down a little bit, right, you start to drop the load a little, that's when viewership starts to carry off. That's when, streams are starting to go down. That's when players start to kind of, dabble into maybe it's time to switch organizations based off of just the homestand level. So, like I said, I think the league itself is in question in terms of, can they even accomplish just the event itself? Can they just accomplish getting through their first year and going positive, or going through their first year and just having everything go right? And I think we're throwing a few more tasks on the top of it that may just be, the final straw, if you will. So is it going to be interesting to watch? Absolutely. And I cannot wait. And like I said, the article may have a few things wrong. It is a little bit early in terms of maybe knowing all this information. And I know there's a few different articles or a few different websites that were reporting on this story. And I know it wasn't, we don't know all the details, right? I mean, we're not going to know everything up to this point, but it could just be more of a load being put on. I think itself, like I said, the league itself is currently in question, and it's going to take a lot of flawless execution from the organization's point of view, from the infrastructure and the CDL, from everything. It's going to take a lot of flawless execution for this to work, from Activision, from Infinity Ward, from all the organizations that are jumping into this, for a lot of them, for the first time. And as an example, I would give this, for me, if you're throwing on this task now, if you are giving these organizations this task, if the CDL is putting on all of these things, an example that I would give is a closeout pitcher, right? For those who watch the MLB, for those who watch baseball, and obviously a lot of other sports can kind of take an example of this as well. But you need a closeout pitcher. You bring in the closer to pretty much finish everything off, right? He is there to close out the game. He's there for the clutch moments. And so for me, the example that I would give for the CDL is that these organizations, the CDL itself, everything involved, they've got to have flawless execution, and they have to have a good closing, which means you need to close out a game whenever everything's on the line. So I bring this example up in terms of, you need to make sure that everything is in play, and there's going to be a lot of things kind of toward the end that need to make sure they're all tied down. Everything needs to kind of be in order, if you will, for the future. So you bring in the closer who's going to close out the game while only being up by a run. There's a lot of pressure on that. I think there's a lot of pressure on these organizations to do a lot in a short amount of time. A closer is there for the clutch reasons, but can they get it done? That's my big question right now. And in terms of can they actually do it, who knows? We'll have to see. But I'm excited to see what, like I said, we learned a lot from the Fortnite World Cup. We've learned a lot in this short amount of time, and I'm excited to see what we're looking like for the future. But like I said, a lot is on the plate right now. We'll have to see if that can, in fact, be accomplished. But let's go and take a look at an early champs look ahead. Now, that's my big question. And I'm glad that Unknown Kid brought it up, which of course is my first subject that we talked about today. Hopefully they put in a lot of focus on the AM scene. Unknown Kid, perfect timing, right? We just talked about that a little bit earlier in terms of how important that is going to be and how influential it's going to be. All those things considered, and even with, like we talked about, right? Even all things considered, with what is necessary for these organizations to accomplish all of this, is the amateur scene even something you have in mind? Probably not. It wouldn't be my first choice. I mean, in terms of everything you have to do to build the infrastructure, to make sure that all of that money is going into use while also building up these stadiums or renting out this space, to make sure you're hiring everyone that needs to be in the picture, while also at the same time wanting to maybe even focus on the amateur scene, which I'm not sure if that's going to be the major focus. We'll have to see what happens, but I absolutely agree with you, Unknown Kid. And make sure, if you guys have not done so already, to follow us on Twitch to stay up to date on all the latest discussions around the CWL, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and NBA 2K League. Last thing of the day to discuss before we close things out. And I know we talked on those subjects for a while, but for me, it's super, super important. A lot of interesting topics going on in the CDL right now. An early champs look ahead. Now, this is going to be more of a subject to think about for next season, or rather for, I should say tomorrow, but for what is going to be the next event, not next season. I'm already thinking about the CDL here. But for tomorrow, I know there's going to be a pool draw show, which I think is going down at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But 3 teams that I currently kind of have in my mind as of this moment that I want to try to give somewhat of a preview for heading into next season. I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the chat as well. Who right now, and I know we don't know the pools, but that's the best part, right? The fact that we don't know the pools is actually pretty nice, which we will be figuring out tomorrow. But let me know in the chat, first team you're thinking about. First team, and True Blue is already asking, who do I think is going to win champs? I'm getting ready to discuss that, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts. So make sure, get involved in chat. I know if you're obviously watching on YouTube, you can't, but feel free to maybe even type in the comments, type in whatever comment section that we're available to. Even tweet at us on Twitter, at Prediction, at Lando as well. Let us know who you think right now is in the greatest position moving forward in the champs. And there are a few boot camps going down. Like I said, chat, get involved. Hey, get involved. Type in the chat who you think is already your main champs front runner. But I know right now, boot camps are obviously key, right? We have 2 different boot camps going on to my knowledge. I know a third one is trying to be in the mix. Boot camp number 1 is actually Genji, E United, 100 Thieves, and Reciprocity, while boot camp number 2 is Optic, Evil Geniuses, FaZe, and Luminosity. So I'm excited to see like how these boot camps kind of work for a few of the teams and how everything kind of goes about for the most part. So I will say the 3 teams that I currently am looking at right now, and Unknown Kid just took maybe one of them out of my picture. He said Genji. The 3 teams that I'm currently looking at as real solid contenders: 100 Thieves, E United, and OG/is Genji. Now I'm kind of in that camp of maybe one or the other in the OG versus Genji conversation, because we saw the exact same performance. For those who were like, oh my gosh, Optic, they got knocked out in last place at playoffs? When has this ever happened? Oh, that's right, it happened last year. It happened last year, as a matter of fact, where Optic went to champs. They had the worst placement at champs in history in terms of their overall placements. It's not too much of a shock. So for me, Optic is quickly getting out of that conversation of a realistic expectation for who I think is going to win champs. And I know a few of them that were already thrown out here. I know Unknown Kid said Genji. They've been the most consistent. Very solid. Who do I want to win? EU or Optic? Who do I think will win? 100T. They played poorly at CDBL Finals. They have the passion, and I still think that they are the best team in the game when they are on like they were at Anaheim. And then Unknown Kid also said FaZe is a shout too. Solid picks. A number of different solid picks. So a few teams, like I said, I know I mentioned 100T, EU, OG/is Genji. Unknown Kid pretty well described it. Most consistent team. Genji looking like a solid roster. My big thing for Genji, and I know this is a quick little preview. Not going to talk on these teams all that much, nearly at all. as much as they should. But next week we'll be really talking more on the pools. Genji, they worry me because of somewhat of a lack of experience. When you come down to those big moments, are they going to be able to clutch up? Because we saw them take the first 3-0 over E United. That's great. Wonderful. Awesome stuff. Love to see it. However, we're looking at, champs when you're on that big stage. A lot of teams close that out. A lot of teams versus E United get it done. They finalize everything that needs to be accomplished, and E United learned from their first series and moved forward afterwards. So my big thing with Genji is, and even in the midst of roster changes, when they were trying to, maybe is it time to pick up Spacely? Is it time to drop Nagafin? What do we want to do here? That for me showed a last second opportunity of, okay, do we have what we need? Maybe not. Let's just go forward anyway. Let's just go forward anyway. It's fine. So for me, Genji, I'm a little bit worried about the lack of experience for the most part. I think they're a fantastic team and really going to catch a lot of rosters off guard. However, I do worry because of the other teams that they're going to be facing off against. E United, I feel like I can't 100% put my faith in them yet because there have been a few different moments, and obviously they seized the opportunity when it came down to Miami right at playoffs. But previously, they've looked a little bit stagnant, and they have had some good moments, right? They've been in the grand finals multiple times, but I'm not sure if I could put my faith in them as of right now. And don't get me wrong, this event, Miami, was one of my favorites of the year. Seeing Clayster win after 1,400 days, the first win with the Twins, Simp and Abizi's first title ever. It was incredible. It was unbelievable. It was fantastic to watch. I'm just not sure if I could put them in that top conversation as of yet, but they're absolutely in there, right? In terms of maybe not my first choice, but they're definitely in that combo. So for me, I'm a little bit worried about Genji, their lack of experience, yet their communication and their chemistry together could be great, but Champs is a different beast. I still do worry about that team. I talked about earlier, this team, none of them, absolutely zero of them were in Season 2 playoffs last year, which is more of a credit than a negative, but you kind of get my point. OG, same situation as last year. Do not win a series at playoffs. They come into champs. What do? They lose to what would be the champs, and they don't even make it to the regular bracket play. They don't even make it out of pools. So I'm worried about OG right now. I know they're constantly changing roles. There's topics about what's going on with them as an organization, which I'm sure kind of weighs on them quite a bit. But and E United, I'm not sure if I can put my faith in them yet. The big conversation for them is we kind of know what's going on, but how can we see Prestini? How can we see Clayster do on the big stage? Big question to ask, and I'm not sure how that's going to all work out whenever it comes down to it. And for me, my pick right now, and as of this moment, to no one's real surprise, I'd imagine, 100 Thieves. More consistent. They lost a close game in comparison to Optic, which, we can obviously point that one out. But 100 Thieves, they've won 2 championships up to this point. You could argue if they have Priesta, maybe they win another one on top of it all. 100 Thieves, for me, just looks like a solid team who had an unfortunate event. And I'll be honest, I would be worried if they won Season 2 playoffs, if they won Miami coming into champs, because that's when the complacency really starts to set in. And I think that was one thing that Crowder had already mentioned for them, was that he's worried about their consistency. That's their biggest opponent right now, is being worried about what they have to show. What do they have left to accomplish? And the fact that they go down the way that they do, the fact that they're not even that top conversation, they don't make it to grand finals. It's not as if they lost a close series really at the far end of the bracket. The big thing for them is, are we still that good? Can this roster live up to the Dynasty title? And I'll be honest, as of this moment, they're starting to fall out of the convo. You tell me they win playoffs, you tell me they win champs, absolutely. That's 4 events in a row. That's a champs title. You've knocked off all the boxes. Now the conversation starts to come in, and I think for me, depending on how they win champs, for a lot of the community is whether or not they will be considered to be a Dynasty-like roster. They have the capability. They have the Slayers in play. They've got 4 guys who can turn up on the map. They've also got an Able who can do the same thing from time to time. They've got the IGL. They've got the infrastructure, and they've pretty much got everything on lock. It's just a matter of actually doing it and getting rid of that complacency, because complacency kills. The number one thing that I discussed when OG won the title back in Infinite Warfare, it is the single best thing that has happened for the Dynasty, and it is the single worst thing that has happened for the Dynasty as well, because we saw them coming into next year, and we all know how that goes. We saw them coming into the year in World War II, not obviously having, for the most part, not having a great year whatsoever. So that's the big thing for me. Can they rebound? Are they ready to rebound? And if so, how do we see that kind of come into fruition? But my current pick is 100 Thieves. I'm interested to see the pool play picks for tomorrow to see exactly how that all lines out. And like I said, I do believe the pool draw show is tomorrow at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time as well. But to just kind of close things out, I want to read a few of your guys' comments as well, maybe respond on those really fast before we do unfortunately have to head out already. But True Blue says, I think Optic are going to iron out their problems and come back to form like they were in Vegas. They are definitely a top 3 team, and they will fix their role issues and in-team communication, and they will rise to the biggest tournament of the year. An Unknown Kid responded and said, I feel like they need to lower their egos and start playing more as a team and less individually, and they seem to pretty much agree when it comes down to those subjects. I'm totally on board with that. I think True Blue brings up some really, solid points in terms of the way that OG is looking right now. Like I said, they just got a lot on their plate. Honestly, Call of Duty in history tends to repeat itself quite as often as maybe a lot of people may not think it actually does. So, like I said, it's a big conversation. It's without question the biggest thing to kind of have on the plate as of now. But hey, like I said, I appreciate you guys for obviously tuning in for the reload today. It was a fantastic show. If you haven't done so already, make sure to follow us here on Twitch. Check us out. Check the Twitch panels just below for any of our YouTube links, for anything of that sort. Follow us on Twitter. Follow myself at Twitter at Lando. We're live here every single Tuesday, folks. We're live here every single Tuesday. If this is your first show, hey, make sure to hit the follow button, because now you have the opportunity to watch us again for next week. I know we're going to be talking about a number of different stuff, probably related more to franchising, and for learning more reports, we'll talk about that when it comes down to the CDL, and we'll obviously be discussing the major discussion of how the pool play is looking for champs as well. So make sure to stay tuned for that. I appreciate you guys all for tuning in for this morning. It was great. I love having Call of Duty shows in the morning, so it's awesome to be able to provide that, but I appreciate everyone for interacting and everyone for being involved. Make sure to follow us on socials, and that's really kind of all I have for today. So thank you guys all for tuning in, and we will see you next week.